Admiral Kethra stood on the command deck of the Imperial destroyer Eternal Conquest and watched the blue planet grow larger on the viewing screen. It was a beautiful world. Ocean covered most of its surface, and white clouds moved slowly across green and brown continents. She had seen many worlds like this one. Most of them now flew the flag of the Belthari Empire. "Report," she said without turning around. Her second officer, a tall male named Vortan, checked his console. Primitive electromagnetic signals detected. Radio waves, basic satellite communications. Technology assessment places them at pre-warp development, perhaps 200 years from discovering faster-than-light travel on their own. Kethra allowed herself a small smile. This was the best kind of conquest. A species advanced enough to have built cities and infrastructure worth taking, but too primitive to offer any real resistance. The Empire would gain a new world, new resources, and new servants. The natives would gain the privilege of serving the greatest civilization in the galaxy. "What do they call themselves?" she asked. "Humans, Admiral. They call their world Earth." "Earth?" she repeated, testing the strange word. "And their population?" "Approximately 8 billion. Vortan said this number with clear satisfaction. 8 billion workers. 8 billion taxpayers, 8 billion bodies that could serve the Empire in countless ways. The conquest of this single world would bring honor to Kethra's family for 10 generations. "Begin standard first contact protocol," she ordered. "Launch communication satellites. I want full translation capability within 6 hours. We will deliver the ultimatum at dawn over their largest population center." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had done this many times before. The Velthari Empire stretched across 3,000 star systems, and Admiral Kethra had personally overseen the annexation of 47 worlds. Some had fought, some had surrendered immediately, all had eventually bent the knee to Velthari rule. This world would be no different. 6 hours later, Kethra transported down to the planet's surface with an honor guard of 50 soldiers. They materialized in a large open plaza surrounded by tall glass buildings. Thousands of humans had gathered to witness the arrival, held back by lines of their own soldiers. Kethra studied them with professional interest. They were soft-looking creatures, 2 arms, 2 legs, flat faces with small eyes. Their skin came in various shades of brown and pink. They wore colorful clothes and carried small electronic devices that they pointed at her like weapons. She later learned these were called cameras. A group of humans approached. They wore formal dark clothing and walked with the careful dignity of leaders, trying to appear unafraid. Kethra recognized the behavior. She had seen it on 47 worlds. "Welcome to Earth," said the human at the front of the group. He was an older male with gray hair and lines on his face. "I am Secretary General Chen, representing the United Nations of Earth. We are honored by your visit." Kethra's translation device rendered his words perfectly. She noted that he had not bowed. This was either ignorance or defiance. She decided to assume ignorance for now. "I am Admiral Kethra of the Velthari Empire," she announced. Her voice was amplified to reach the entire crowd. "I come bearing a message from His Imperial Majesty, the Divine Emperor Vetharak III, Lord of 3,000 suns, Master of the Galactic Arm." She paused to let the titles sink in. The humans watched her with expressions she could not quite read. "Your world has been chosen for annexation into the Velthari Empire. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. This is an announcement of your new reality. You have one choice to make: peaceful submission or violent subjugation. The outcome will be the same. Only the cost will differ." Secretary General Chen did not react immediately. He glanced at the other humans beside him, then back at Kethra. "Admiral," he said slowly, "I think there may be some misunderstanding. Earth is not interested in being conquered. We are a peaceful world, but we are not a weak one. Perhaps we could discuss other arrangements, trade agreements, cultural exchange, mutual cooperation." Kethra felt a flicker of annoyance. Some species needed a demonstration before they understood their position. "You misunderstand," she said. "I am not asking for your input. I am informing you of what will happen. My fleet consists of 50 warships, each capable of destroying a city with a single shot. Your planet has no space fleet, no orbital defenses, no weapons capable of scratching our shields. You are helpless. The only question is whether you accept this fact now or after we reduce one of your cities to glass. The crowd murmured. Some of the humans looked afraid. Others looked angry. A few wore expressions that Kethra found strange, almost like they were trying not to smile. Secretary General Chen held up his hand, and the crowd fell silent. Admiral Kethra, he said, I appreciate your directness. Earth's leadership will need time to discuss this matter and prepare our response. We request 7 days. 7 days? Kethra raised an eyebrow. To do what? You have no options. To prepare our people, to organize a peaceful transition, to say goodbye to our old way of life. Chen spread his hands. Surely the Velthari Empire can spare 1 week. You have waited millions of years to find us. What is 7 more days? Kethra considered this. The request was not unusual. Many species asked for time before surrender. They needed to mourn their freedom, to adjust to their new reality. It was a small kindness that cost the Empire nothing. Very well, she said. 7 days. At the end of this period, you will present your formal surrender. If you do not, my fleet will begin orbital bombardment of your coastal cities. This is not a bluff, Secretary General. Do not test me. We understand completely, Chen said. There was something strange in his voice. Not fear, not resignation. Something else entirely. 7 days, thank you, Admiral. Kethra transported back to her ship feeling satisfied. The conquest was proceeding normally. The humans were clearly intelligent enough to recognize a hopeless situation. In 7 days, Earth would belong to the Empire. She could not know what was happening far below the planet's surface. 12 kilometers beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility that appeared on no map and existed in no database, a man named Director Marcus Webb walked through a corridor carved from solid rock. The walls hummed with energy that human science could not explain. Lights that had burned for 60,000 years illuminated his path. He reached a massive circular door covered in symbols that predated human civilization by eons. The door recognized his presence and slid open, revealing a chamber so vast that its ceiling vanished into darkness above. In the center of the chamber stood a console. It looked like nothing built by human hands because it had not been built by human hands. It was older than humanity itself, older than the dinosaurs, older than the first fish that crawled onto land. Secretary General Chen's voice came through Webb's communication device. They've given us 7 days. I heard, Webb said. He stood before the console, his hand hovering over its surface. Is the Council in agreement? Unanimous. For the first time in history, every nation on Earth has voted together. They understand what's at stake. They understand what we have to do. Webb nodded slowly. He had trained for this moment his entire life, as had his father, and his father before him. The knowledge had been passed down through generations, waiting for the day it would be needed. Beginning activation sequence, he said, his hand pressed against the console. The ancient machine responded to his touch, recognizing the genetic markers that had been carefully preserved across 60,000 years. Light spread outward from the console, racing through channels in the floor, climbing the walls, spreading through the entire facility. Deep beneath the Earth's crust, systems that had slept since before the age of mammals began to wake. Power cores that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built hummed to life. Processors that made quantum computers look like abacuses started their calculations. On the surface, seismologists around the world looked at their instruments in confusion. The readings made no sense. The entire planet was vibrating at a frequency never before recorded, but there were no earthquakes, no volcanic activity, just a deep, steady pulse like a heartbeat. In a small apartment in Tokyo, a young woman felt her teacup rattle on the table. In a research station in Antarctica, scientists watched their equipment go haywire. In a quiet suburb of London, a dog began howling at something only it could sense. The Earth was waking up. Admiral Kethra noticed the energy readings from her command deck. They were unusual but not alarming. Perhaps the planet had more geothermal activity than initial scans suggested. It was not relevant to the conquest. She retired to her quarters, confident that in 7 days she would add another world to the Empire's collection. She was wrong. Below her feet, below the ocean, below the rock and magma, something ancient and vast was stirring. something that had waited patiently while life evolved on its surface, something that had watched humanity grow from primitive apes to a civilization capable of inheriting its power. The Earth was not just a planet, and humanity was not just another primitive species waiting to be conquered. The Velthari Empire had made a terrible mistake. They just did not know it yet. The year was 1947, and the world was still recovering from the deadliest war in human history. In the frozen wastes of Antarctica, far from the battlefields where millions had died, a different kind of discovery was about to change everything. Commander Robert Hayes led his expedition across the ice sheet, following readings that his equipment insisted were impossible. The magnetic sensors had gone crazy 3 days ago, pointing towards something buried deep beneath the frozen ground. His superiors had ordered him to investigate. He wished they had not. The temperature was 40 degrees below zero. The wind cut through his gear like a knife. His team of 12 men followed behind him, their faces hidden behind goggles and scarves. None of them complained. They were military men, trained to endure hardship without question. "Sir," called out Private Collins, the youngest member of the team, "the readings are getting stronger. Whatever it is, we're close." Hayes checked his own equipment and frowned. The readings made no sense. According to the sensors, there was a massive metallic structure directly beneath them, buried under 2 miles of ice. That was impossible. Antarctica had been frozen for millions of years. Nothing could be down there. But the readings did not lie. "Set up the drilling equipment," Hayes ordered. "We're going down." It took them 6 hours to drill through the ice. When they finally broke through into the chamber below, Hayes was the first to descend. He rappelled down through the shaft they had created, his flashlight cutting through darkness that had existed since before humans walked the earth. His feet touched solid ground, and he looked up. The chamber stretched for miles in every direction. The walls were made of a metal that gleamed silver under his light, covered in symbols and patterns that hurt his eyes if he looked at them too long. Machines the size of buildings stood silent and dark around him, their purpose unknown and unknowable. And in the center of the chamber, floating in a beam of soft blue light that had no visible source, was a sphere. It was perhaps 10 feet across, perfectly smooth, and it seemed to contain swirling galaxies within its surface. Hayes approached it slowly, his heart pounding. He reached out his hand, drawn by something he could not explain. The moment his fingers touched the sphere, the entire chamber came to life. Light flooded the space. The machines began to hum. And information poured into Hayes's mind like water breaking through a dam. He saw the truth. Earth was not a planet. It had never been a planet. 60,000 years ago, it had been a ship. The vessel had been built by a civilization so ancient and so advanced that their name existed only as a mathematical equation. They had mastered time and space, matter and energy. They had built world ships capable of crossing the universe, each one a weapon of unimaginable power, each one home to billions of their kind. But even they had not been immortal. A catastrophe had struck their civilization, one so terrible that even their technology could not save them. In their final days, they had sent their world ships outward, seeding them across the cosmos, hoping that someday new species would evolve to inherit what they had left behind. One of those ships had entered the solar system and settled into orbit around a yellow star. Over millions of years, life had evolved on its surface. First bacteria, then plants, then animals, then humans. The ship had been waiting, watching, judging. And now, with the touch of Robert Hayes's hand, it had decided that humanity was ready. Hayes collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by the knowledge flooding his mind. He understood things now that no human had ever understood. He knew how the ship's weapons worked, how its shields operated, how its engines could move a world across the galaxy in the blink of an eye. He also understood the responsibility. The sphere was a library, an archive of everything the ancient builders had known. It had waited 60,000 years for someone to touch it. Now it was transferring that knowledge to humanity, piece by piece, carefully filtered to avoid destroying minds not ready for the full truth. Hayes's team found him 3 hours later, still kneeling before the sphere, tears frozen on his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Get me a direct line to the president, now." Within a month, the most powerful nations on Earth knew the truth. Within a year, they had agreed to keep it secret. Within a decade, a hidden facility had been built around the Antarctic Archive, staffed by scientists and engineers who spent their lives learning the ancient technology. Progress was slow. The builders' technology was so advanced that understanding even basic systems took years of study. But humanity was patient and determined. They learned that the moon was not a natural satellite, but the ship's command module, separated and placed in orbit to serve as a control station. They learned that the planet's core was actually a power source capable of generating more energy than 1,000 suns. They learned that weapon arrays the size of continents lay dormant beneath the oceans, waiting to be awakened. They could not activate these systems. Not yet. The technology was too complex, and the ship had safety protocols that prevented unauthorized use. But they could study. They could prepare. They could pass the knowledge down through generations, waiting for the day when the ship might be needed. That day came on a bright Tuesday morning when alien ships appeared in Earth's sky. Director Marcus Webb had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. His grandfather had been one of the first scientists brought to the Antarctic facility. His father had led the team that finally decoded the ship's operating system. Marcus himself had spent 40 years learning the ancient language, studying the builders' philosophy, and preparing for the day when humanity would have to make a choice. Now, standing before the central console 12 kilometers beneath the Pacific Ocean, he was ready. The console glowed with soft blue light as Marcus entered the activation sequence. The builders had designed their ships to be operated by beings who had evolved on their surfaces. The genetic markers left by thousands of generations of human evolution served as the key. Only a true child of Earth could wake the planet from its long sleep. Authorization confirmed, a voice said. It spoke directly into Marcus's mind, bypassing his ears entirely. Welcome, child of Earth. You stand before the bridge of the world ship designation, Hope's last light. I am the ship mind. How may I serve? Marcus took a deep breath. An alien fleet has arrived. They intend to conquer our world and enslave our people. We need to defend ourselves. Scanning. The ship mind was silent for a moment. I detect 50 vessels in orbit, belonging to a species designated in my records as Velthari. Classification: aggressive expansionist civilization. Technology level: intermediate. Threat assessment: minimal. Minimal? Marcus felt hope surge in his chest. You can stop them? Stop them! The ship mind almost sounded amused. Child of Earth, I could destroy their entire empire without leaving orbit. But I suspect that is not what you truly want. Your species has grown wise in its long evolution. You understand that power without restraint leads to destruction. Tell me what you truly want. Marcus thought carefully before answering. He thought about the wars humanity had fought, the millions who had died in conflicts over land and resources. He thought about the weapons they had built, from swords to nuclear bombs, each one more destructive than the last. He thought about what humanity could become if it simply had more power to destroy. We want to survive, he said finally. We want to be free. We want to protect our world without becoming monsters ourselves. Can you help us do that? The ship mind was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, there was warmth in its voice. The builders would be proud of you, child of Earth. You have passed the final test. So many species, when given access to ultimate power, immediately think of conquest. You think of restraint. You think of choice. You are ready. The console expanded, rising from the floor to surround Marcus with holographic displays. He saw the ship's systems coming online one by one. Power cores warming up, shield generators activating, weapon arrays loading themselves with energy that could crack planets. I am granting you full access to all systems, the ship mind said. The ship is yours to command. But remember, power is not just the ability to destroy, it is also the ability to choose not to destroy. Use this gift wisely. Far above on the surface of the Earth, people felt the ground tremble beneath their feet. In cities around the world, lights flickered. Animals grew restless. The very air seemed to hum with anticipation. Admiral Kethra noticed the energy readings spiking on her sensors. She frowned and ordered her science officers to investigate. They reported that the planet's electromagnetic field was fluctuating wildly, but they could not explain why. She did not know that beneath her feet, a weapon older than her entire civilization was waking up. She did not know that in 6 days, she would face a choice that would determine the fate of her people. And she certainly did not know that the primitive species she planned to conquer had just inherited the power of gods. But she would learn. They all would. The 7 days ended on a gray morning. Clouds covered the sky above the plaza where Admiral Kethra had first made her demands. Rain fell in a steady drizzle, soaking the streets of the human city. It seemed fitting weather for a species about to lose its freedom. Admiral Kethra transported down with her honor guard, expecting to receive humanity's surrender. She had prepared a speech about the benefits of imperial citizenship, the opportunities that awaited those who served faithfully. She had even considered showing mercy by not executing any of their leaders. Secretary General Chen waited for her in the same spot as before. But something was different. His posture had changed. He stood straighter, spoke more slowly, and there was something in his eyes that Kethra had never seen in a conquered species. He was not afraid. "Admiral Kethra," he said politely, "thank you for your patience. Earth has prepared its response to your ultimatum." "Good," Kethra kept her voice cold. "Present your formal surrender. I will outline the terms of annexation." Chen smiled. It was a strange smile, almost gentle, almost pitying. "I am afraid there has been a misunderstanding," he said. "Earth does not surrender. Earth does not accept annexation. Earth has a different proposal." Before Kethra could respond, her communication device crackled to life. The voice of her second officer, Vortan, was sharp with panic. "Admiral, you need to return to the ship immediately. Something is happening to the planet." Kethra looked up at the sky. The clouds were moving strangely, swirling in patterns that had nothing to do with weather. The ground beneath her feet was vibrating with a deep, steady pulse. "What is happening?" she demanded. Chen's smile did not waver. "We are waking up, Admiral. I suggest you watch carefully." Kethra transported back to her command deck just as the first reports started coming in. Her officers were shouting, pointing at screens, trying to make sense of readings that should have been impossible. "The oceans are moving," one officer screamed. "Something is rising from the water." Kethra turned to the main viewing screen and felt her blood freeze. In the Pacific Ocean, something was emerging. It was a structure of some kind, massive beyond comprehension. It rose from the water like a mountain being born, shedding waterfalls that could drown cities. It was made of silver metal covered in symbols that glowed with blue fire. A weapon array. A single weapon array. And it was larger than her entire fleet. "Energy readings are off the scale," another officer reported. "That structure alone has more power output than our home star." More structures were rising around the world. In the Atlantic, a shield generator the size of Europe broke through the surface. In the Indian Ocean, propulsion systems that could move a planet emerged from the depths. Everywhere, across every continent and ocean, the Earth was revealing its true nature. And then the moon moved. Kethra watched in horror as the human moon shifted in its orbit. It was not a natural movement. It was deliberate, controlled, precise. The moon repositioned itself directly between the Velthari fleet and the Earth, and as it turned, she saw that its surface was covered in weapon ports. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. Each one glowing with power that made her ships look like toys. "Admiral," Vortan's voice was barely a whisper. "The moon. It is not a moon. It is a command station, a weapons platform. It is targeting us." The planet's magnetic field had changed too. It wrapped around Earth like a shield, visible now as a shimmering curtain of light. Her sensors could not penetrate it. Her weapons could not breach it. The planet had simply removed itself from their reach. A communication signal cut through the chaos on her command deck. A human voice, calm and measured. "Attention, Velthari Fleet. This is Director Marcus Webb, speaking on behalf of the United Earth Defense Council. Please observe the following demonstration." Before Kethra could respond, one of the weapon arrays in the Pacific Ocean fired. A beam of pure white light shot upward into space, passed through the fleet without touching any ship, and struck a small asteroid approximately 1 million kilometers distant. The asteroid did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a chunk of rock perhaps 10 kilometers across. The next moment, there was nothing but empty space. That was the lowest power setting, Director Webb continued. Our planetary defense systems are now fully online. We have confirmed targeting solutions on every vessel in your fleet. We estimate that we could destroy your entire force in approximately 4 seconds. Silence on the command deck. Kethra's officers stared at their screens, faces pale, hands trembling. However, Webb continued, that is not our intention. Humanity does not want war. We did not build the ship, but we have inherited the responsibility that comes with it. Our proposal is simple. Leave. Return to your empire. Tell them that Earth is not available for conquest. Tell them that we offer friendship to any species that approaches us with peaceful intentions. And tell them that those who come with hostile intent will find us ready. Kethra found her voice. You expect me to simply retreat? To flee like a coward? I expect you to survive, Admiral. I expect you to go home to whatever family you have and continue living your life. This does not have to be a defeat. It can simply be a meeting between two civilizations that decided to respect each other. The choice is yours. Kethra looked around her command deck. Her officers would not meet her eyes. They had seen what that single weapon could do. They knew that their ships were nothing against such power. They wanted to live. She thought about the 50 warships under her command. 50 crews. Thousands of soldiers, all of them trusting her to make the right decision. She thought about glory and honor and the expectations of the Empire. And then she thought about the families waiting for her soldiers to come home. If I leave, she said slowly, if I return to the Empire and report what I have seen here, what then? His Imperial Majesty will not accept this. He will send a larger fleet. He will send everything we have. We know, Webb replied, and we will be ready. But consider this, Admiral. Every ship that comes here is a ship that does not need to come. Every soldier who survives is a soldier who gets to go home. We are not your enemies. We are simply not your victims. There is a difference. Kethra stood in silence for a long moment. Through the viewing screen, she could see the weapon arrays, the shield generators, the transformed moon. She could see a planet that had become a fortress, a weapon beyond anything the Empire had ever faced. And yet the humans were not attacking. They had the power to wipe out her fleet in seconds, and they were offering her a chance to leave in peace. Why? She asked finally. Why not simply destroy us? It would be easier, safer. We cannot threaten you. Why let us go? There was a pause before Webb answered. When he spoke, his voice was softer. Because we were you once, Admiral. A long time ago, we conquered and killed and destroyed without mercy. We made weapons that could end our entire species. We came very close to destroying ourselves before we ever reached the stars. We have learned through terrible suffering that strength means nothing without wisdom, that power means nothing without restraint. We let you go because that is who we want to be. Not conquerors, not destroyers, just people who made a different choice. The words hung in the air of the command deck. Kethra thought about her own history, her own empire. She thought about the worlds they had conquered, the species they had enslaved. She thought about what they might become if they continued down that path forever. Navigation, she said quietly. Set course for Imperial space. All ships. Vortan stepped forward. Admiral, you are actually going to retreat? I am going to survive, she said. I am going to report what I have seen, and then I am going to think very carefully about who we are and who we want to be. She looked at the viewing screen one last time. Bring us about. We are leaving. As the Velthari fleet turned and began its journey home, Admiral Kethra watched the blue planet shrinking behind them. It looked peaceful now, quiet, just another world orbiting a yellow star. But she knew the truth. She knew what slept beneath those oceans. And she knew that the galaxy would never be the same. The Imperial Palace of Velthari Prime was the largest structure in the known galaxy. It covered an area the size of a small continent and rose so high that its upper towers pierced the atmosphere. For 10,000 years, it had been the seat of power for the greatest empire the universe had ever seen. Today, it was filled with rage. She did what? Emperor Vethrak III stood before his throne, his scales flushed dark purple with fury. He was a massive figure, tall and broad, with ceremonial armor that had been worn by his ancestors for countless generations. His eyes burned with a fire that had destroyed worlds. The messenger before him trembled, but continued his report. Admiral Kethra has withdrawn from the target system, Your Divine Majesty. She reports that the planet designated Earth has revealed itself to be a vessel of unknown origin, armed with weapons of unprecedented power. She recommends a diplomatic approach rather than military conquest. Recommends? The Emperor's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire throne room. A mere admiral recommends policy to me. The messenger pressed his face to the floor. I am only delivering her words, Your Divine Majesty. I beg for mercy. The Emperor turned away, his tail sweeping across the polished floor. Around him, his advisors and generals stood in careful silence. None of them wanted to draw his attention in this moment. Show me, he commanded. Show me what she saw. The chamber's holographic systems activated, displaying the recordings that Admiral Kethra had sent with her report. The Emperor watched as the ocean gave birth to weapon arrays. He watched as the moon repositioned itself. He watched as a single beam of light erased an asteroid from existence. When the recording ended, silence filled the throne room. What is this? The Emperor asked quietly. What species builds such things? His chief science advisor stepped forward carefully. We have analyzed the data, Your Divine Majesty. The technology is unlike anything in our records. The closest comparison we can find is to theoretical designs that our own scientists consider impossible to build. Whoever created this vessel was operating at a level of advancement so far beyond our own that comparison becomes meaningless. But not the humans, another advisor added. According to our scans, the humans themselves are primitive. They developed nuclear weapons less than a century ago. They have not even colonized their own moon. The Emperor stroked his chin thoughtfully. So they found this vessel. They did not build it. That appears to be the case, Your Divine Majesty. Then they do not truly understand it. They cannot possibly master technology so far beyond their own development. The Emperor's eyes gleamed. They are children playing with weapons they cannot comprehend. We simply need to take those weapons away. The chief military advisor cleared his throat. Your Divine Majesty, even if the humans do not fully understand the technology, the weapons are clearly operational. Admiral Kethra's fleet was helpless against them. If we send a larger force— Larger? The Emperor laughed. I will not send a larger force. I will send the Grand Fleet, every ship, every soldier, every weapon we possess. 300 warships against one planet. They may have powerful defenses, but they cannot fight the entire empire. His advisors exchanged nervous glances, but none dared to argue. Prepare the fleet, the Emperor commanded. We leave within the cycle. 3 days later, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history entered the solar system. 300 warships of the Velthari Grand Fleet, led by the Emperor himself aboard his flagship, the Divine Retribution. Behind them came supply ships, troop transports, and command vessels. It was a force designed not just to conquer a world, but to crush all hope of resistance. They found Earth waiting for them. The planet hung in space, blue and peaceful, its weapon arrays retracted beneath the oceans. The moon had returned to its normal position. If not for the energy readings that filled Velthari's sensors, it might have looked completely harmless. Emperor Vethrak stood on his command deck, studying the world before him. Open a channel, he ordered. The communication systems crackled to life, and a moment later, a human face appeared on the screen. Director Marcus Webb looked tired but calm. Emperor Vethrak, he said politely, I see you received Admiral Kethra's report. I received the report of a coward, the Emperor replied. I am here to correct her failure. I am here to claim what belongs to the Empire. Webb nodded slowly. I was afraid you might say that. Your Majesty, I must ask you to reconsider. We have no wish for conflict. We offer friendship and trade to any who approach us peacefully. There is no need for this. There is every need, the Emperor said. You possess technology that could threaten my empire. You must be brought under our control or destroyed. There is no third option. There is always a third option, Webb replied. Please, your fleet is impressive, but it cannot harm us, and we do not want to harm you. Order your ships to stand down. Return home. Live." The Emperor laughed. "You dare threaten me? I command 300 warships. I have conquered 1,000 worlds. I am the divine emperor of the Velthari." Webb was silent for a moment. Then he said very quietly, "I am about to send you a data file. I ask that you review it before making your decision." The file arrived on the Emperor's console. He opened it with a sneer, expecting some desperate plea for mercy. Instead, he found technical specifications. Detailed, comprehensive specifications for every weapon system, every shield generator, every engine and power core on the vessel called Earth. Numbers that should have been impossible. Power outputs that defied the laws of physics. Capabilities that made his grand fleet look like a collection of children's toys. The Emperor read the file in silence. His scales slowly paled from purple to gray. One shot from the primary weapon could crack a planet's core. The shield system could withstand a supernova. The engines could move the entire world faster than light. The vessel had enough firepower to sterilize the galaxy, and the humans were sharing this information freely. "Why?" the Emperor asked finally. "Why show me this?" "Because we want you to understand," Webb replied. "This is not a bluff. This is not a negotiation. This is reality. You cannot defeat us. You cannot conquer us. All you can do is choose whether your soldiers live or die. That choice is yours. We have already made ours." On the flagship's command deck, Admiral Kethra stood among the other officers. She had been summoned from her quarters to witness the conquest. Now she watched her Emperor read the specifications file, watched his expression change from arrogance to disbelief to something that might have been fear. Around her, other officers were receiving the same file on their personal devices. She saw faces go pale. She saw hands begin to tremble. She heard whispers spreading through the fleet like wildfire. The numbers did not lie. They could not win this fight. "Your Divine Majesty," the chief military advisor said carefully, "perhaps we should consider the humans' offer. A strategic withdrawal is not the same as defeat. We could regroup, develop countermeasures, return when we are better prepared." "Silence!" The Emperor's voice was barely a whisper. The throne room fell quiet. For a long moment, Emperor Vethrak III stood motionless, staring at the specifications that described a weapon capable of destroying everything he had ever built. His empire, his legacy, his entire civilization. All of it could end in seconds if he made the wrong choice. He thought about glory and honor. He thought about the expectations of his ancestors. He thought about the shame of retreat. And then he thought about his daughter, 3 years old, playing in the gardens of the Imperial Palace. He thought about her growing up in a galaxy where the Velthari still existed. He thought about her future. "All ship," he said finally. "Stand down weapons." Gas filled the command deck. Officers stared at their Emperor in shock. "Your Divine Majesty," the military advisor began. "I said stand down." The Emperor's voice was cold and flat. "Prepare the fleet for departure. We are returning home." On the communication screen, Director Webb closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, there was something like relief in his expression. "Thank you, Your Majesty. You have made the right choice." "Do not speak to me of right choices," the Emperor snapped. "You have humiliated the Velthari Empire before the entire galaxy. You have shown us to be weak. There will be consequences." "Perhaps," Webb agreed, "or perhaps you will be known as the Emperor who saved his people when he could have spent them." History is full of conquerors who are remembered only for their wars. Leaders who choose peace are remembered for much longer. The Emperor did not respond. He turned away from the screen and walked toward his private chambers, leaving his officers to carry out the withdrawal. But as he walked, something that Admiral Kethra said earlier kept echoing in his mind. Why not simply destroy us? It would be easier, safer. The humans had chosen not to. Even now, with the entire Grand Fleet at their mercy, they were letting them go. Why? The question would haunt him for the rest of his life. And deep in his heart, in a place he would never admit existed, he already knew the answer. News travels fast in the galaxy. Within days of the Velthari fleet's retreat, every species in known space had heard the story. The details varied with each telling, growing more dramatic and more terrifying with every retelling. But the core facts remained the same. The mightiest empire in the galaxy had attacked a primitive world called Earth. The primitive world had turned out to be a planet-sized battleship of impossible power. The empire had retreated in shame. For the first time in 10,000 years, someone had told the Velthari no and lived to talk about it. The reaction among the conquered species was immediate and electric. On 100 worlds, slaves whispered to each other about the planet that could not be conquered. On 1,000 space stations, merchants shared stories about the weapon that could crack suns. In every corner of the empire, people began to ask a dangerous question. If the Velthari could be stopped, why had we never tried? The first ambassadors arrived at Earth 3 months after the retreat. They came in small ships, approaching slowly, broadcasting messages of peace on every frequency. They came from species that had been conquered generations ago, species that had almost forgotten what freedom felt like. Director Webb met each delegation personally in a conference room overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Through the windows, visitors could see the weapon arrays that had turned back the Grand Fleet, now retracted beneath the waves, invisible except for a faint shimmer of light. "Why have you come?" he asked each group. And each group gave the same answer, in their own words. "Because you showed us it was possible to say no." The Kethaval came first, a species of gentle herbivore who had been enslaved by the Velthari for 2,000 years. They asked for protection. They asked for hope. They asked if Earth would help them find their freedom. Then came the Mortai, a race of master engineers who had built half the Empire's warships before being reduced to servants. They offered their skills in exchange for sanctuary. Then the Valshi, the Kreentar, the Hollow People of the Void. Species after species, delegation after delegation, all carrying the same desperate hope. And to each one, Webb gave the same careful answer. "We cannot fight your wars for you. We will not become new conquerors, trading Velthari chains for human ones. But we can offer you something else. We can offer you a place to stand, a voice that will be heard, a friend who will not let you be forgotten." Earth became something new in the galaxy. Not an empire, not a power, something stranger and more precious. A sanctuary. Ships began arriving daily, carrying refugees from across the stars. Some were escaped slaves seeking freedom. Some were rebels seeking support. Some were simply ordinary people who had heard stories of the planet that stood against the Velthari and wanted to see it for themselves. The humans welcomed them all. Cities grew on Earth's surface, strange hybrid places where alien architecture stood beside human buildings. Schools opened where children of a dozen species learned together. Hospitals treated patients whose biology defied everything human doctors had known. Restaurants served food from 100 worlds. And through it all, the great ship that was Earth remained quiet. Its weapons stayed beneath the waves. Its shields stayed dormant. Its engines stayed cold. A weapon that chose not to be used. 1 year after the retreat, Admiral Kethra arrived. She came alone in a small personal shuttle, broadcasting her identity openly. She requested permission to land and meet with the human leadership. After careful discussion, the request was granted. Director Webb met her in a garden in New Zealand. It was spring there, and the hills were covered with flowers. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks touched with snow. It was about as different from a warship's command deck as anything could be. Kethra walked slowly, studying the flowers, the trees, the small animals that moved through the grass without fear. She had never seen anything quite like it. "This is beautiful," she said finally. "I did not expect beauty." Webb nodded. "We did not expect visitors. The universe is full of surprises." They sat on a bench overlooking a lake. For a long moment, neither spoke. "I am no longer an admiral," Kethra said finally. "When we returned home, the Emperor stripped me of my rank. He blamed me for the failure of the first expedition. He said I should have fought rather than retreated." "I am sorry," Webb said. "That seems unjust." "It is the Velthari way. Someone must be blamed when things go wrong." She paused. "But I am not here to complain about my fate. I am here to ask a question." "Ask." Kethra turned to face him directly. "When I retreated the first time, I asked your people why you did not simply destroy us. I received an answer about wisdom and restraint. I accepted it then because I had no choice. But the question has haunted me ever since. She gestured at the garden around them. You have the power to rule the galaxy. Absolute, unchallengeable power. You could crush the Velthari Empire in days. You could free every slave, topple every tyrant, remake the universe in whatever image you chose. Why do you not? Why do you sit here growing flowers while injustice continues throughout the stars? Webb was quiet for a long moment. When he answered, his voice was thoughtful. Let me tell you a story. A long time ago, before we knew what Earth truly was, humans almost destroyed ourselves. We built weapons that could end our entire species. We created systems of cruelty that turned people into things. We came within minutes of launching attacks that would have made our world unlivable. He looked up at the sky. We learned something from that time. We learned that power is easy. Destruction is easy. Any child can knock down a tower of blocks. But building something that lasts, something that matters, something that makes life better rather than worse, that is hard. That takes patience and wisdom and care. But you could end suffering now, Kethra pressed. With your weapons you could— Could what? Webb interrupted gently. Destroy everyone who oppresses others? And what then? Who decides who the oppressors are? Who makes sure the liberators do not become new tyrants? How do you build a better galaxy with weapons alone? He shook his head. The species that built this ship learned that lesson too late. They had ultimate power, and they used it to try to perfect the universe. They failed. In the end, they destroyed themselves, trying to make everything right by force. Then what is the answer? Webb smiled. The answer is this garden. The answer is the refugees we welcome, the schools we build, the example we try to set. We cannot force anyone to be better, but we can show that better is possible. We can prove that strength and mercy can exist together. We can be what others might choose to become. Kethra sat in silence, processing his words. I have spent my entire life in service of empire, she said finally. I have conquered worlds. I have commanded fleets. I have done terrible things in the name of glory and expansion. She paused. I do not know how to be anything else. That is why you came here, Webb said gently. Not to ask questions, to find a different answer. Tears formed in Kethra's eyes, strange purple drops that fell onto the grass at her feet. Is there a place here for someone like me? Someone who was once an enemy? Webb stood and extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Kethra took it. There is a place here for anyone who wants to build rather than destroy, he said. Anyone who wants to choose rather than conquer. Anyone who looks at power and asks not what it can take, but what it can give. He helped her to her feet and gestured toward the distant city. Come, let me show you our world. Let me show you what we are trying to build. And then you can decide what you want to become. They walked together down the hillside, through the garden, toward a future that neither of them could fully imagine. Behind them, beneath the oceans, beneath the ancient crust, the great ship that was Earth hummed quietly to itself. It had waited 60,000 years for this moment. It had watched as humans grew from simple creatures to something worthy of its inheritance. And now at last, it was home. Not a weapon, not a fortress. Just a world filled with people learning how to be better, one choice at a time. Above them, the stars stretched out across the infinite sky, full of darkness and light, full of danger and possibility. The galaxy was vast and old and full of pain. But on one small world, hope was taking root. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.